Hello and welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I'm the owner and managing broker of Summit Properties Northwest. I also own Reynolds and Kline Appraisal, both here in Bellevue, Washington. Form 21. That's what we're going to get into. All right, so to start off with, I'm going to give you a pro tip. Go to Express Forms, type in your search 21. Take a look. Form 21 is indicated here. The pro tip is over here, you see Man 21. That's for Manual 21. Pop open Manual 21. You will have a description, a far greater description that I'm going to give you on each and every single little item within every form. So if you have questions on a line item, you can always go to the manual. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go back to Form 21. And we're just going to rock through this form. All right. So to begin with, you've got the date. That's typically the date your buyer is going to make the offer on. MLS number, that comes right off the MLS listing. You've got the offer expiration date. Either the seller will indicate we're not reviewing offers until here. You just got to have it make sense with your offer. Buyer's name, buyer 1 here, buyer 2 here, status. You got a drop-down menu. Choose the correct one. Could be an unmarried person, married person, whatever that might be. Seller's name, got room for 1, 2 there. Here you've got tax parcel, and that's tax parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3. Got room for up to 3 tax parcels. Those are typically maybe a 10-digit number, something like that. That'll either come off of the MLS listing or from the tax records. Here's the property address. This would be the house number and street name, along with city name, county, state, and zip code. Included items, you're going to go ahead and check which ones are appropriate. If there's something that you want your buyers to have that they're requesting, and if you're not sure if that is part of the deal or not, go ahead and check this box and fill out that portion right there. Purchase price, you're going to go ahead and $234,000, whatever it might be. And then you can write it out in the next one, 2.34 million in the next line. Earnest money, that is the deposit that will go to escrow. That is not the down payment. That's the money that if the deal goes south and your buyer is at fault, that's the amount of money that they lose typically in a transaction. Delivery date, this is how soon you're going to need to deliver the earnest money. Usually it's mandatory state law 2 days after. If there's something else in there, then you indicate it there. To be held by the buyer's brokerage firm. That's kind of old school, how it used to be. Brokerages actually had a trust account and they retained the escrow, the earnest money in escrow. But the closing agent in escrow typically handles it now. So you're going to go ahead and click that box in the form of a promissory note if that is what you're doing. And if that is the case, you need to include an addendum for a promissory note. Default, check only one. So you've got one of 2 options. This is if the deal goes south. Forfeiture of earnest money, that is the money in this section right here. Or seller's election of remedies, that usually means the sellers have the opportunity to sue. If you're a buyer, I would typically go with forfeiture of earnest money. But any of these things depend on the transaction. If you're not an experienced agent, and that's probably the reason you're watching this video, have your managing broker go through this transaction. If you have any questions on what you should or shouldn't do in a certain particular situation, get somebody's second opinion, whether it's a managing broker, whether it's another broker who's got more experience, somebody with more experience than you to bounce off ideas of, hey, does this make sense? Title insurance company, Rainier Title, or whatever it might be, Pacific Title, so whatever land title, whatever company it is that you choose. Oftentimes, so here you've got a merit title, attorney's title, any of those, whichever one you choose, put in that box. And then you can put in the agent's name there. Closing agent, oftentimes title will have the escrow company as well, the closing agent. But if they're different, you can break them out. And here's the individual's name. You can put that in as optional. Closing date. It's very handy to have the person that you want to have handle the transaction if you indicate their name and possibly a phone number for contact on this portion of the form. Closing date, that's when you are saying, hey, your buyer is going to close on this transaction. Possession, whether that's on closing, the date that it actually transfers, or on another one, you could indicate that here, check that box and go plus 3 days. Used to see a lot of that because it gives 3 days for the seller to pack all their stuff up and get the heck out of the home. You don't see that as much anymore because most of the time sellers have got their stuff out, but it's whatever it's whatever you negotiate with the seller. So number 12, services of closing agent for payment of utilities requested. Okay, that just means that escrow is going to pay up to closing date what the seller owed, and then new buyer's account takes over from there. If you do want to go down that road, requested, you're going to need to fill out Form 22K. So I often tell people go ahead and do this because then you don't have that, hey, did you pay this escrow bill? No, I didn't. You, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, can you pay it? You don't have that tug of war there after closing because getting money out of people after closing becomes tricky. Have escrow handle it unless you've got a good reason not to. Charges or assessments levied before but due after closing. This is something, maybe there's a special assessment on the property, local improvement district. There's been an assessment, but that assessment isn't going to actually take place until after this transaction has closed and the property is transferred from the buyer to the seller. You can go assumed, means the buyer is going to take it as part of the transaction, or prepaid in full by seller at closing. Everything that you're doing on this form are instructions to escrow as to how this transaction is going to go at closing. Number 14, seller citizenship. This is the FIRPTA form. This is seller is or is not a foreign person for purposes of U.S. income tax. This came up a number of years ago. And what it does is that if you've got somebody that is not a U.S. citizen and they are a foreign person, taxes will be taken out automatically because the government wants to get their money. All right, that's fair enough, right? Information verification period. It expires XYZ number of days after mutual acceptance, or it's satisfied and waived by the buyer upfront. We're not doing that info period. We're just going to move on with the transaction. Number 16, agency disclosure. Buyer represented by the buyer's broker, buyer and listing broker, limited dual agent, or unrepresented. Any of those are options. Typically, if you are writing up this offer for your buyer and you're the only person, you'd indicate buyer broker. Check the appropriate boxes there. And seller is represented typically by the listing agent. But again, put down what's accurate. And if you don't know, ask somebody with more experience. Buyer brokerage firm compensation. Typically, this is indicated on the listing. It'll be, say, 2.5%, 3%, whatever it may be, or amount offered in listing. So you're going to put percentage there. Oftentimes, you're going to go, so you could go dollar for the actual dollar amount or percentage, and then you type in 3%, and that'll be recorded on the form. I didn't get that right. Or you could put in, it's going to be $45,000. You could just put that right in there. Pay as offered, or you can negotiate and indicate that information on another sheet. So we've had a lot of compensation changes, and some of that has to do with a big, huge lawsuit that has come about. And so don't worry about that too much, but know that this is an important line and make sure you get that compensation correct. Otherwise, there could be issues down the road. Addendum. This is where you break down all the other addendum that you're going to include in your offer. So maybe you've got financing, maybe you've got an appraisal addendum, maybe you've got optional clauses, Form 22D. Make sure you've got, so each of these sections has a click in there and you've got a drop-down menu. When you're finally getting ready to submit your final offer, take a run through your offer and make sure you've got all the forms in there, because that gives the other broker an idea of, okay, so there is an escalation clause. There is an optional addendum. Maybe there's some more information on that. They will go looking for those. If they don't see it here, it's not a deal breaker, but it's a greater indication. Okay, I've got the full package. This is the information we're going to run on. Then you have the buyer's signature along with date. You've got the buyer's address, city, state, zip, buyer's phone number, their fax number. Fax number, are we even really doing faxes anymore? Not really, but you've got holdover from the olden times, right? Buyer's email address. the buyer brokerage firm, buyer's broker print, their name, MLS lag number. A lot of this is automatically going to get inputted as you put that MLS number in, and it'll automatically get transferred through. But if you're unclear, okay, whose information do I put in here? Ask your managing broker. The firm document email address. So for Summit Properties, we've got an email address. It's called offers@summitpropertiesnw.com. All my brokers know, okay, I put that address in here, and then anything that goes out, CC that. It's typically something that goes to your managing broker so that they have the ability to track all the emails going back and forth. So that's what that is there. And I encourage everybody to submit to their broker's email address. It might be required at your brokerage. You've got the buyer broker email address, and you've got the buyer broker DOL license number. That if you're the buyer's broker, that is your Department of Licensing number. Here is your firm's Department of Licensing number, not the MLS number. All right, so that's basically it for the information. And you've got other breakdowns that you'll need to read through, because at some point in time, you're going to have a client that is going to say, hey, how about line 4 in section B under the second page of Form 21? What about that? So you don't need to have this information like on the purchase price memorized, but you need to have kind of a working idea of what it's talking about. Because at some point, somebody's going to ask you that question, and what you're going to say is, you know what? I'm not 100% sure. Let me review that super quick, and I'll get back to you. Or if you know it because you've read it a couple of times, you're like, okay, here's what that means. And you can give them kind of a broad understanding of condition of title, line number 3. All right, line number 49. And that's how this is written. It's written as a legal document by attorneys. So don't go off road and putting a whole bunch of stuff in. Try and stay within the box, fill out what you've got here. And if you get into needing to write kind of freehand an additional addendum, make sure you have your managing broker review it until you get the hang of things. And you know, kind of, all right, I can do this. I can't really do this. This isn't appropriate for me to do. Because this is a legal written document by attorneys. And so you want to stay within this framework as much as you can. So we've got closing and possession. That's broken down even further. Section 1031, like-kind exchange. You've got a bunch of stuff in here. Don't have to have it memorized. Be familiar with it. Closing costs and proration and charges and assessments. All right. Computation of time. It's kind of like school. You learn it once and you have familiarity with it, but you're not going to use it on the day-to-day, right? The first part that we went through, that is going to be much more critical. Here you've got, remember we talked about forfeiture of earnest money. We've got a little bit more of description here. Seller's election of remedies. I went through it in about a sentence. They've got a handful more here. All right, this happens. Here's what we're doing. And then you've got a number of other things all the way down to the letter X, Y, and then at the bottom, you're going to have your buyer initial date, and that is Form 21. Sweet and simple. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I have videos on just about every single form in the MLS and then a bunch more. So if you're enjoying this content, love to have you subscribe to this channel, Summit Properties Northwest. Hit that notification bell because we release content fairly often. You don't want to miss out. Also, I am the host of News for Reasonable People. We're on YouTube. We're on any of the podcast platforms out there. If you enjoy conservative news, you might want to check that out. Thanks in advance. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.